It was supposed to be the future, a jet so strong it could fly straight through the shockwaves of a nuclear blast, a fighter so tough it could survive missions no other aircraft on Earth could attempt, a machine engineered to intimidate the Soviet Union and guarantee American air dominance for decades. Its name was the XF-90, a sleek, futuristic, almost mythical aircraft created at the dawn of the atomic age. But despite all the hype, all the innovation, and all the secret tests, America abandoned it. Why? What dark truth forced the United States to walk away from the indestructible fighter it spent years trying to perfect? Today, we dive into the forgotten story of the XF-90, the nuclear-proof jet America ditched. Number 1. The world on edge. The year is 1945. The world has entered an era defined by scientific breakthroughs that reshaped global power. Nations have seen technologies capable of altering entire cities, and governments are now aware that future conflicts may look very different from those of the past. The United States, emerging as a leading technological force, begins preparing for a new kind of strategic competition, one driven by altitude, speed, and rapidly advancing aerospace science. Every branch of the military seeks the next major innovation. The Army Air Forces focuses on long-range aircraft. The Navy looks toward a new generation of jet-powered. And the newly forming U.S. Air Force has its own vision, a fighter so capable, so resilient, and so advanced that it could accompany long-range aircraft on challenging missions across vast distances. This ambition leads to one of the boldest aviation concepts ever introduced. Not just a new jet, but one designed to operate in environments once thought unreachable. Number 2. Enter Lockheed. Narrator Lockheed's Skunk Works division, the same legendary group that would one day create the U-2, the SAR. 71 and the F-117 was given the challenge. The requirement was simple: build a long-range, nuclear-hard, supersonic escort fighter. Lockheed's answer: a beast unlike anything in the skies at the time, the XF-90. It looked more like a spaceship than a fighter jet, a long, needle-shaped fuselage, swept wings shaped for supersonic flight, a massive reinforced frame that could absorb nuclear shockwaves, twin turbojet engines buried deep inside the aircraft, a structure so overbuilt engineers nicknamed it the Flying Anvil. It was thick, heavy, and muscular, less like the sleek fighters we know today, and more like a futuristic assault aircraft built to punch through radiation clouds. But here's the dark truth. From the moment it was designed, it carried the seeds of its own downfall. Number 3, the problem nobody talked about. Narrator. On paper, the XF-90 was unstoppable. In reality, it had a problem no engineer could ignore. Wait, the XF-90 wasn't just heavy, it was the heaviest fighter aircraft ever proposed in its class. All that nuclear-proof reinforcement came with Acosta steel plates, strengthened bulkheads, reinforced wings, a thickened tail assembly, radiation-resistant materials. Engineers were told, make it survive a nuclear blast. They did, but they created a monster. Even with 2 engines, it could barely take off without afterburners. Acceleration was sluggish, climb rate was disappointing, maneuverability was stiff. And worst of all, the engines simply weren't powerful enough for the mission. To survive a nuclear battlefield, you need speed, lots of it. But the XF-90 struggled to even reach the speeds of much lighter fighters from the same era. The Air Force had wanted a nuclear escort. Instead, they were handed a nuclear-proof brick, but Lockheed wasn't ready to give up. Number 4, the test that made history. Narrator 4, even though the XF-90 had performance issues, the Air Force still wanted to know one thing: could it actually survive a nuclear blast? To find out, the government sent the XF-90 prototype to the Nevada test site. What happened next is something no other fighter aircraft has ever experienced. They placed the XF-90 near G, round 0, close enough to be hit by shockwaves, heat, and radiation, but far enough to avoid total vaporization. Then they detonated a nuclear bomb. Not a simulation, not a model, a real atomic weapon. The XF-90 was thrown into the air, slammed back down, twisted like a piece of metal in a storm. Parts of the skin melted, rivets popped, glass shattered, the tail deformed, but it survived. And because one test wasn't enough, they did it again, another nuclear blast. And the XF-90 incredibly was still standing, broken, burned, scarred, but still intact. It became one of the only fighter jets in history to survive multiple nuclear detonations. But now the dark truth was undeniable. It could survive nukes, but it couldn't survive the world of aviation. Number 5, the rise of the jet age. Narrator dared by the early 1950s, fighter technology was evolving at light speed. New jet engines, new alloys, new aerodynamics, new missions. While the XF-90 was being smashed by nuclear shockwaves, other aircraft were proving something more important: speed beats strength. The McDonnell XF-88, its direct competitor, was lighter, faster, cheaper, easier to produce, more maneuverable, and far more promising as an escort fighter. The XF-88 would eventually evolve into one of the most feared aircraft of its time, the F-101 Voodoo, a fighter so fast it nearly broke wind tunnel instruments, a Mach 2 monster built for long-range nuclear missions. Compared to the XF-90, the Voodoo was simply better in every way that mattered. The Air Force didn't need a nuclear-proof tank. It needed a razor-sharp spear, and so quietly, almost without ceremony, the XF-90 was cancelled. Number 6. The Air Force's final verdict. The official statement was brief and technical. The parts of the XF-90 does not meet operational requirements, but the broader truth was far more layered. It was heavier than expected. It lacked the needed performance. It consumed far too much fuel. Its development costs were high, and its technology was already being surpassed. The XF-90 became a symbol of a military navigating a rapidly changing era, a time when new scientific discoveries were altering strategy, expectations, and priorities. In the end, the Air Force reached a simple conclusion. Rather than building an aircraft designed to endure extreme conditions, they needed one capable of reaching its mission objectives swiftly and efficiently. Number 7. The long, sad afterlife. Narrator sad. After cancellation, the remaining XF-90 prototype suffered a strange fate. Instead of being placed in a museum or preserved as a historic relic, it became a test target. It was used for ballistic tests, armor penetration studies, blast experiments, structural stress research. The same reinforced structure that once impressed scientists became the perfect instrument for destructive trials. Eventually, the nuclear, scarred, bullet-riddled XF-90 was dumped in the desert, almost forgotten. Years passed, decades. Then, in the 1990s, something remarkable happened. Workers at a demolition site near the old test range discovered a twisted, rusted, unrecognizable mass of metal. It was the XF-90. After surviving nuclear blasts, weapons tests, and the harsh Nevada desert, it was still there, battered but not destroyed, just as it was designed. The wreckage was recovered and is now preserved at the National Museum of the U.S. Air Force. Not in perfect condition, but as a ghost of the jet America created and abandoned. Number 8. The dark truth. So why did America ditch the nuclear-proof jet? Why would a nation pour years of research, millions of dollars, and the brilliance of Lockheed's best engineers into a machine, only to abandon it before it ever saw real combat? Here's the dark truth. The XF-90 was built for a war nobody truly understood. In the late 1940s, the world stood in the radioactive shadow of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The Cold War had just begun, but its rules had not been written. Military thinkers were terrified, fascinated, and confused all at once. They believed nuclear warfare might be survivable if soldiers and pilots were protected by the right equipment. And so they imagined aircraft like armored knights with wings slicing through atomic shockwaves and radioactive storms. Engineers were told to prepare for the unthinkable, escort fighters that could survive the heat, radiation, and crushing blast of a nuclear detonation. The XF-90 was the ultimate expression of that fear. It wasn't just built strong, it was built absurdly strong. Layers of reinforced steel, titanium, like durability, skeleton, like spars designed to resist forces no pilot should ever experience. But by the time the XF-90 was ready for testing, the Cold War had evolved. Strategy had changed, understanding had matured. Nuclear shockwaves weren't obstacles for brave pilots to punch through. They were death zones, instant, unavoidable, apocalyptic. You don't fly into them, you avoid them, you outrun them, or you prevent them entirely. Suddenly, the XF-90's defining feature, its near indestructibility, was not just unnecessary, it was a liability. The aircraft was heavy, slow to take off, and underpowered compared to sleeker, more modern designs. The Air Force realized that survival wasn't about brute strength. It was about range, speed, stealth, flexibility. And the XF-90, for all its brilliance, simply didn't fit the new world. It wasn't just overbuilt. It was built on a misunderstanding of what nuclear war would actually look like, and that's why its story matters today. It shows us that even legendary companies like Lockheed, even brilliant minds working at the cutting edge of innovation, can be completely wrong about the future. It proves that technological marvels can become obsolete overnight when the assumptions behind them collapse. Most of all, it reminds us of a hard truth. Some innovations must be abandoned. Some dreams, no matter how advanced, belong to the past. The XF-90 was the wrong answer to the right question, a masterpiece of the wrong kind, and that is why America left it behind. Conclusion: look at the XF-90 today. Twisted metal, scorch marks. Steel warped and folded by atomic heat, lying silent in the desert like the skeleton of a creature built for a world that never arrived. It is not a symbol of failure. It is a symbol of an era when the world was still trying to understand its own destructive power, when nuclear fire was new, terrifying, and misunderstood. Engineers believed they could outsmart it, outbuild it, wrap pilots in armor so strong it could stare into the blast and survive. The XF-90 reminds us that even the strongest machines can be casualties of changing ideas. It teaches that technology doesn't move in a straight line. It lurches us and leaves masterpieces behind. And it shows one final truth: the future doesn't always belong to the toughest machine. Sometimes it belongs to the fastest.